Advisory Board of Family Compassion, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting American families by ensuring access to the care and resources they need to thrive. We are a community of believers focused on strengthening American families and the institutional and social frameworks that support them. We are here today to lend our voices and the voices of hundreds of thousands others in support of federal protection of the right to contraception. Family Compassion received over 400,000 written prayers from churches and other organizations around the country and across the theological spectrum. Each of these represents an expression of hope and makes a clear plea for our elected leaders in the Senate to come together and affirm and protect the access to contraception that families have depended on for generations. The people who signed these prayers did so because they believe preventive contraception isn't a political issue. Rather, it's a necessary right to personally determine their family's formation and future. While this right has been enjoyed by families for several generations, recent rhetoric has been worrisome for women, couples, and families as they hear potential threats to this long-held right. For example, Justice Clarence Thomas wrote that the Supreme Court should reconsider the cases that codified the right to contraception. There have also been state-level efforts to restrict access to contraception. Furthermore, the recent state vetoes of bipartisan right to contraception bills by Nevada Governor Lombardo and Virginia Governor Youngkin have further raised concern and underscored the need for a federal bill affirming and protecting this right. On a more personal level, as a developmental psychologist specializing in early development and family thriving, I've seen that empowering individuals to make personal family decisions for themselves is good for babies, good for child outcomes, good for parent relationships, and good for family thriving. Contraception plays a vital role in helping parents ensure they are financially and emotionally ready to start and grow their family, which in turn helps reduce childhood poverty and build strong and resilient families. Finally, as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and Director of Child and Family Advocacy at Mormon Women for Ethical Government, I have heard from many women across the political spectrum who asked us to share their support of this bill. For most Americans, and definitely for the many of the women and families I know, contraception is how we as parents decide when we are best ready to have and raise our children. I have heard from many women of faith who believe determining the timing and circumstances of adding to their lives should be affirmed and protected as a personal decision made thoughtfully and prayerfully apart from government's control. Often when people talk about contraception, the focus is on preventing pregnancy. I have also heard from women of all ages, from young teens to grandmothers, who require contraception to address their chronic medical needs not related to pregnancy prevention. Their access to these medical therapeutic uses of contraception should be protected. As a bridge-building organization, we have witnessed and applauded collaborative, bipartisan work in the Senate before. We urge the Senate to come together this week to support families by affirming and protecting this right. Thank you. It's now my pleasure to introduce you to Patricia Ruiz-Cantu, fellow board member of Family Compassion and president of Renace USA.
Good morning, Patricia Ruiz-Cantu, and I'm here today to speak about the importance of the contraception and reproductive rights. As a coalition of evangelical and Pentecostal Hispanic faith leaders in Wisconsin and 5 other states, we believe that this is not a bipartisan or is not a partisan or ideological issue. It affects all of us. It doesn't matter what religion affiliation you have. What is at stake is the well-being of our families, our communities, and our everyday life. I want to take a moment to speak directly to the Spanish-speaking Americans who are watching and praying for this effort. We know many of you have been impacted by the lack of access of reproductive health, including contraception. We see the devastating effects that it has on our families, in our communities, and in our society as a whole. The truth is that the government cannot dictate what we could do with our bodies. God has given us free will to choose, and that includes the ability to make decisions in our own reproductive health. It is not a religious freedom issue. It is a matter of basic human dignity and respect for our bodies. Buenos días. Soy Patricia y hoy voy a hablar con ustedes. Sabemos que muchos de ustedes han sido afectados por la falta de acceso a la atención médica reproductiva, incluyendo a la anticoncepción. Vemos los efectos devastadores que tienen las familias, en las comunidades y en nuestra sociedad en conjunto. Por eso esta es la verdad hoy. El gobierno no puede decirnos qué hacer con nuestros cuerpos. Dios nos ha dado una libertad, un libre albedrío para poder elegir y escoger. Y esa es la decisión que nosotros tenemos. Tenemos la capacidad de tomar las decisiones sobre nuestra salud y sobre nuestra religiosidad. Una cuestión de dignidad humana, básica y respeto por nuestros cuerpos. Como persona de fe, creemos que Dios nos ha dado un regalo de vida y con ese regalo de vida una responsabilidad de cuidar nuestros cuerpos y eso incluye el acceso a atención médica reproductiva integral, incluyendo la anticoncepción. Estamos pidiendo tomar decisiones informadas sobre nuestros propios cuerpos e información relacionada con nuestra libertad. Por eso le pedimos al gobierno que tome esa oportunidad para darnos esa libertad que Dios ya nos ha dado. Por lo tanto, intentamos que nuestros senadores hagan lo correcto. Los incitamos a que apoyen a la legislación para que garantice el acceso a una atención médica reproductiva integral, incluyendo la anticoncepción. Ahora quiero pedirles a todos los que se unan, a todos un llamado de oración, un llamado de acción para que pidamos para todos nuestros funcionarios electos, independientemente de su afiliación, independientemente de su creencia política, para que tengan la sabiduría y el coraje para tomar una decisión de protección del bienestar de la mujer y de nuestras familias y comunidad en general. Oremos para que tengan el coraje de hablar y abogar por lo que creemos. Oremos para la sabiduría, para navegar estas complejas decisiones que se tienen que tener con compasión y empatía. Que hagan lo correcto esta semana y que garanticen el acceso a una atención médica reproductiva integral y que incluya anticoncepción. Dios los bendiga y tenemos que tomar esa acción. Gracias.
Thank you, Patricia. Now I'd like to turn the time to Academy Uwan, another Family Compassion Board member, public theologian, co-founder of Truth Table and Truth Table's Foundation.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So today, let me move the mic up. Today I join my voice with the over 400,000 people who have signed prayer petitions in favor of the Right to Contraception Act. We are here to push senators, particularly Republican senators, to vote to codify and protect an individual's ability to access contraception by voting for the Right to Contraception Act. Last month, Governor Youngkin vetoed Virginia's Right to Contraception Act, falsely citing religious freedom as the reason for the veto, which overruled the will of the people of Virginia. As a public theologian and a devout Christian, I take religious freedom seriously. Nothing in the bill in any way infringes on anyone's religious freedom because the bill protects the freedom to get contraception. It does not require businesses or health plans to provide it or anyone to pay or give it, and that is a good thing. The Right to Contraception Act simply ensures that the individual's right to this form of health care that they so desperately depend on cannot be taken away. Fundamentally, this is a theological issue, albeit not in the way that Youngkin erroneously cited. My Christian faith tradition holds that all people are made in the image of God, which means that they have intrinsic dignity and worth and agency to love and honor God and love their neighbor. Access to contraception enables families and individuals to exercise their God given agency to decide when to start or expand their family. Moreover, contraceptives support it actually supports public health by helping reduce STIs, and it reduces certain forms of cancer. What is often lost in this conversation is the fact that contraceptives are a form of healthcare that helps women manage painful symptoms of endometriosis, severe cramps, heavy menstrual flow, and longer periods. Contraceptives ensure that individuals contribute to society's flourishing equally. That is a theological matter because we need everyone to contribute to the welfare of our cities, states, and nation. After all, the flourishing of the collective is bound up with the individuals too. Make no mistake about it, the real threat to religious freedom is coming from politicians like Youngkin, who perpetuate polarization in our nation by pandering to the most extreme elements in our politics. Then he dares to justify the veto by using religious freedom as a cover to tell a family or an individual they can't buy contraception from someone who wants to sell it. That is somehow infringing on religious freedom. Well, we're here to say that we are not buying what Youngkin is selling, and we are hoping and praying that the senators of goodwill and conscience will vote for the Right to Contraception Act tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Economy. Next, I'd like to introduce Katie O'Connor, who comes to us from the National Women's Law Center.
Thanks and good morning. I'm Katie O'Connor, the Director of Federal Abortion Policy at the National Women's Law Center. I want to start by thanking Senator Markey and Representative Manning and the many co-sponsors of the Right to Contraception Act for sending a clear message that we must protect the fundamental right to birth control. To be clear, the Right to Contraception Act shouldn't be necessary. For nearly 6 decades, Americans have relied on the constitutional right to contraception to protect our health and to plan for our futures. But our constitutional right to contraception is no longer safe. When the Supreme Court overturned the right to abortion, Justice Thomas invited a challenge to the right to contraception, and extremists are already taking him up on that invitation. States like Missouri have tried to ban emergency contraception and IUDs in Medicaid. An Oklahoma legislator introduced a bill this year claiming that it would ban emergency contraception. Idaho law already bans emergency contraception in public university health centers. And Indiana law excludes IUDs from a program meant to expand access to contraception for postpartum people. Given these recent efforts, the Right to Contraception Act is needed to offer an additional protection for this fundamental right. The Right to Contraception Act is especially important for those who already face systemic inequities in our healthcare system and who would be most impacted by efforts to limit access to contraception. Black, Indigenous, Latin, Asian American, and Pacific Islander Americans, and other people of color, immigrants, people with low incomes, those living in rural areas, and those with disabilities. By no accident, these are the same communities that have been impacted by our country's dark history of racial violence and reproductive coercion. People from all walks of life, of all faiths and of no faith, in cities and in rural areas, conservatives and liberals alike, all support access to birth control. The Right to Contraception Act would simply reaffirm that each of us has the right to make the deeply personal decisions that are best for our health, our lives, and our futures. We thank the champions leading this effort. We're proud to work alongside them and every day to improve access to birth control and to protect our right to contraception. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katie. I'd like to introduce now Reverend Mark Thompson, civil rights advocate and host of Make It Plain.
Good morning. Glad to be here to be in support and in solidarity, and especially honored to be here to stand with and to be an ally to women in this fight. We are still, even though people in the media don't talk about it as much anymore, we are still involved in a war that's being waged against women and women's bodies. And I think it's important that those of us as men stand up on behalf of women. This is a question about women's bodily autonomy. The impact that the right to contraception has on women making choices about their lives, their families, their futures, their careers even. And it seems that there are those, it doesn't seem, in fact, it's a fact that there are those who want to turn the clock back in terms of women having autonomy over their own bodies. It is no longer speculation. It is clear what will happen if the Congress remains in Republican hands, if the Senate flips, and if the White House changes. So this legislation is absolutely important, as much as restoring all the protections of Roe is important. And so I think that at this hour, as many people as possible should get involved in this fight, not be distracted by anything else. We really do not have all of the rights that we are to have in this country, and many of them are under attack: voting rights, affirmative action rights, but the rights to women and the rights to women's bodily autonomy is also critical. Without the right to contraception, women of color are disproportionately affected. Women of poor and low income are disproportionately affected. This will have a ripple effect. Without the right to contraception, women are affected when it comes to infant mortality and maternal mortality. We know those rates as they are now are already too high. And so I always like to challenge those who share the same gender as I do, that part of being a man is standing up for the rights of women and protecting women and allowing women, investing in, encouraging, believing, and supporting women's ability and right to be empowered to make their own decisions on behalf of their own bodies. We no longer need men in power, men in Congress, men in the government, who oftentimes are the same ones who say they want less government involved in decision making on behalf of American citizens. That doesn't apply to women. They want the government involved in making decisions on behalf of women. And that's wrong. It is appalling, and we need not go back. We have come a long way in this country, clearly not far enough in terms of the history of women being subjugated exclusively to the decisions of men. But women, in terms of their own bodies, should be self-determining and should have that autonomy. I say this today not only as a man, but as a member of the clergy as well. There is no contradiction, in my view, in my Christian worldview, in my theology. There is no contradiction in women having autonomy over their own bodies and the right to contraception. There is no contradiction between that and what the scriptures do say. Women, too, are equal to men. Women are children of God. And without women, none of us men would be here. So this is an issue. I hope that the Senate will pass this legislation. I want to commend family planning and everyone here who has been doing this great work. Again, we mentioned contraception, but just one other point. Family planning is also important. The access to family planning, the access to education in that regard, that is on the block too in Project 2025 and the other plans that those who are not allies to women have in place. And so I hope that we all get in this fight, we expand it, then more people get involved. This, if it's not already, this should be the issue in November. In fact, somebody once said, remember in Rovember. That's what we're calling it. But not only for that, but for this issue as well as contraception. If they can take Roe, they can take away contraception. They can take away family planning. They can continue to do things. And once they come for that, they come for other things. They've already taken away affirmative action. They've taken away voting rights. Marriage equality is on the block. We are kidding ourselves if we don't believe that. So all of those things are before us. Diversity, equity, inclusion is in jeopardy. So I'm here to stand today with all of you and honored to be here. Pass the Right to Contraception Act. The Senate, let's get it signed into legislation, and let's protect women's bodily autonomy. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Thompson, for sharing your perspective and being here today. Finally, it's my pleasure to introduce Sister Simone Campbell, former Executive Director of Network and leader of Nuns on the Bus.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to stand with my sisters and brother, glad you made it, to speak out on an issue that is being politicized for political gain. And therein lies the trouble. That's why we're here. Because politicians want this to be politicized so they can make it simple and a successful argument during this election cycle. But we women know better. I, a Catholic sister, am here not just to stand with my sisters and brother, but to speak out for the needs of my Catholic sisters who use contraceptives not to prevent conception, but rather as health care. That is critically important medication for the regulation of menstrual cycles and for dermatological problems and several other issues. This is healthcare. When the politicians get their hands on a simple soundbite and think this will create a divide, they are wrong. The fact is, healthcare is more complex than anything that politicians can say about it. And that's why we're here today. A diverse collection of people of faith saying that it is faithful to care for our families, to care for our bodies, to care for ourselves. And so I am honored to stand here and to support the over 400,000 prayer petitions saying prayer can see us through. As a woman of faith, I know that in challenging times, it is faith and the Spirit who can lead us to the new place. So, my prayer is today, with over 400,000 others, that the Senate tomorrow will see the way through to a new place and care actually for women and not the politicization of hot-button issues. Let us care for our women in this country. Let us be present to our families. Let us support each other, and let's pass this bill. Thank you.
Sister Simone gave the perfect wrap-up, so I'll just end by saying thank you so much for being here today, and we're watching. Thank you.